What's happening, guys? This is RPG here, and I'm here to present another 2 cents video on the 2 cents block to you all. How's everyone enjoying the year of 2016 so far? I bet most of you are looking forward to the plethora of RPG goodness that we are getting this year, such as Project Cross Zone 2, Bravely Second Endlayer, Fire Emblem Fates, Dragon Quest 7 and 8, Final Fantasy Explorers, Persona 5, and especially Final Fantasy 15. Speaking of Final Fantasy 15, that is the topic I want to discuss with you all today, as there is a new quote that the game's director Hajime Tabata discussed in a recent interview about the narrative and writing for Final Fantasy 15 being comparable to that of The Last of Us. Basically, Tabata said that the studio is aiming to deliver a narrative where the gameplay and storytelling are really one and the same, and even says that it's important that the story progresses through the gameplay in a very unforced way, in a similar way that it was done with Naughty Dog Software's The Last of Us for the PlayStation 3 in 2013. On top of that, Tabata also shared a few details on the story, saying that it is a really big part of the game, as it centers around the emotional journey of Noctis as he goes from being a young prince in waiting to becoming the next king of his country. Other things in the story that Square Enix is bringing to the plot is the connection between Noctis and his father Regis, to saying that Final Fantasy 15 is not going to be a love story, although elements of love and romance is going to be important to convey the growth of Noctis throughout his journey. Those are the things that Square Enix is trying to focus within the story, seeing as how Kazushige Nojima is now taking inspiration from a Western game developer with how to convey the tale in Final Fantasy 15 amongst many other things. When I look at the article for what it is, I can see where Hajime Tabata is coming from, because you can see that in the episode Duskade demo where Noctis and his servants are conversing with each other during the gameplay, when it comes to the enemy encounters, going towards specific areas of the game, and the actual event scenes themselves. What Square's doing with the story is definitely a reflection toward what Naughty Dog did when it came to The Last of Us, as you can see the dynamic between both Joel and Ellie during their 9-month journey. They started off having an estranged relationship, but grew into the father-daughter bond that Joel seemed to have lost when his actual daughter died in the game's prologue. Now, when it comes to Noctis and his servants, their bond seems to be a strong one from the get-go, as I see Noctis' relationship with Luna Freya being one of the many driving forces of the game's overall story, as Tetsuya Nomura wanted to originally have Stella from Final Fantasy Versus 13 have a complexing personality that makes her stand out as much as Celeste Share in Final Fantasy VI before she was dropped. I can see that being established, but if the game story plays too much like Chris Farley and David Spade and Tommy Boy, where they were the center of attention the whole time, then that is probably going to hurt the story in my opinion. Regardless, I'm staying cautiously optimistic about it, as I think that the cast is actually really cool, since Final Fantasy 15 is the first game in the series to go for a more modern realistic approach in the setting, even though it is going for that over-the-top action in the combat. Once again, I can see where Square is going with the story, as the real-time gameplay, activities, environments, dungeons, caves, resting sites, villages, and cities are going to reflect the conversations of the characters based on the demo and what was shown from the most recent trailers. However, I do have a major concern when it comes to this idea with Square wanting both the narrative and gameplay to go hand in hand. They need to go by that word, because the thing that really killed The Last of Us for me wasn't the story, but it was the gameplay. The game played out like your ordinary survival horror games such as Resident Evil, The Evil Within, and other games, as you were limited with your resources, which I had no problem with, but I felt that the game didn't come off being revolutionary, as Sony was hyping the hell out of that game to no end. Case in point, I still to this day find that The Last of Us is largely overrated, because I feel that the game didn't live up to the hype because of the gameplay. Visuals and story are great ways to hype up people, but you have to have quality gameplay to back it up, or else the game won't live up to that hype. I know I may get a lot of flack for this, but I didn't think that a game like Fallout 4 lived up to the hype, as I felt I was playing Fallout 3 all over again, but with new bells and whistles. Plus, there was even the manner of the game crashing, since it did release as a partially broken mess that still hasn't been fixed. Which is why I am happy that Square is taking their time with Final Fantasy 15, so that they don't run into the same less than stellar quality they had with Final Fantasy 13 and its god-awful sequels. Even I think that a game like Xenoblade Chronicles X is better than Fallout 4 from a technical standpoint, as that game fully optimizes the Wii U's prowess to handle the game of that massive scale. Granted, the story may be hit and miss to many people, but the gameplay sure made up for it in the end, as I still get lost in the game's world of Mira because of how insanely large it is. All I'm saying is that Square needs to make sure that Final Fantasy XV's gameplay is superb like the story for both of them to go hand in hand, or else it is going to become another victim of undesirable circumstances like it already has been. Now, there is even that notion where people feel that Square should have looked at their past games for inspiration from the writing, which I agree, but the problem is that newer games shouldn't copy and paste the tale and narrative of a past game into a new one if they hope to keep the series relevant, as that is what killed Final Fantasy XIII for me, as it was like I was seeing Final Fantasy VII staring at me right in front of my eyes. Unless if it's a game that continues to follow in the same universe, much like the games from the Evil East Alliance and the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, where the number of companion pieces to both Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy XII derive from, then it is alright to continue using the setting, characters, dialects, tone, and such, since each of them have their own games that connect to each other. If Square doesn't do a copy and paste of The Last of Us into Final Fantasy XV if they want to keep it original and different from other games from a Japanese or Western standpoint, then I don't see any problem with what Square is doing for their newest game when it comes to the narrative, but I guess we'll see how that goes when the game launches later this year on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One worldwide. Alright guys, that is all with my 2 cents on this topic. I want to hear your own about this news article. Are you fine with what Square is doing for the narrative of Final Fantasy XV? Do you not like it? Are you indifferent? Or what do you think Square should have done to make Final Fantasy XV have a great story in its final product? Make sure to rate this video as well as leaving your positive and negative feedback down in the comments. Also be sure to hit that subscribe button underneath this video, as more support from you guys will mean that more content is coming from me in the future that you won't find anywhere else. Until next time, this is RRPG signing off by saying Godspeed and game on, gamers. Have a good one.